Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of the Orthodox Academy of Crete all over the world, we have the great pleasure today to have an international seminar with absolutely distinguished speakers, and it is our honor to have with us Mr. Sven Giegold, who is a member of the European Parliament and chair of the European Christian Convention. Also, we have Reverend Dr. John Chryssavgis from the United States, who is Archdeacon of the Ecumenical Patriarchate and Theological Advisor to Ecumenical Patriarch regarding environmental issues. Also, we have Dirk Vansintjan from Belgium, who is the president of the European Federation of Citizen Energy Cooperatives. And also last but not least, for sure, is Theodota Nantsou from Greece, who is the head of policy from WWF Greece. The Orthodox Academy of Crete, during the 53 years of service to the local and international community, we put a special emphasis regarding the environmental issues. Today, we're discussing about our moral duty under the climate crisis, society, church, and EU, the European Green Deal. And the big challenge is how to formulate a holistic action plan. And this is the base idea that we're going to see today from 4 different aspects of view, based on the experience and the knowledge of our guests, and also to continue, as we'll see all this work as a continuing the work of our academy that we have done regarding the environment. It includes our photovoltaic installation. You can see the photo behind me. We have managed to reduce more than 40 tons of CO2 every year. And at the same time, we have the Museum of Cretan Herbs here at the Academy. We run educational programs, and also we have run, especially the last 6 years, a number of conferences that have to do with climate crisis, energy communities. But at the same time, the big question is how to have a sustainable future. And this is the major point that we will have to give some answers today. The general idea of this seminar is that we'll have presentations for about 12 minutes by each one of our speakers. And then it will have a discussion between all members of the panel, and also all the questions from the audience, either from Zoom or from the YouTube, are more than welcome from all the people who are attending us. As far as the technical details, from the people who are attending us from Greece and they want to hear Greek, they can select from the Zoom the interpretation icon, which is presented at the application of the Zoom. And after you click at the interpretation, you just select the Greek, and you will be able to hear the Greek translation. We have to thank the Hellenic Cables, which with their kind support, because we were able to have this ability to have Greek translation today. And also we have to thank our translators, Mrs. Mirka Kapi and also Stavros Totsis, who have the kindness to do all this tough work of the translation today. So let's start. The first introduction will be done by the General Director of the Orthodox Academy of Crete, Dr. Konstantinos Urbas. Dr. Urbas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Adonis. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, dear speakers of today's webinar on the theme Our Moral Duty Under the Climate Change. Dear participants, Kalispera, welcome to Crete, at least online, unfortunately. We would like to welcome you to the Orthodox Academy of Crete and thank you warmly on behalf of the President of the Academy, His Eminence Metropolitan of Kissamos and Ceylon, Amphilochios, and all the board members of our institution. I would like to thank you very much, the speakers, especially Sven Giegold, Dirk Vansintjan, the Reverend Father John Chryssavgis, and of course, our friend Theodota Nantsou for the participation. I'd like to share with you 2 or 3 thoughts in our today's theme. My first point is that this meeting is a form of dialogue at national and local level to inform the people about environmental protection issues. Today, we take another step. We are taking the debate to the European level, both on the issues of the Green Deal, but also on the future of Europe, which started a long time ago. This debate is open, regular, and transparent dialogue between churches and the European institutions, according to the Article 17 of the Lisbon Treaty, especially the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union. And as you are mentioned, dear Sven, churches can play a key role in debating the social and ecological aspects together. My second point of view is that a few days ago, we celebrate here in the Academy the 5 years since the Holy and Great Synod of the Orthodox Church, which took place here in the Academy in June 2016. For me, the most important thing is not only the text or the decision of this council. Most importantly, this text led us to write for the first time a social teaching of the Orthodox Church with the title For the Life of the World. It is not just a description text, and I like underlined, but this text gave not only the points for different problems, but especially complain against everyday life problems of our society. And especially, I mention in this text, the paragraph 41 with the theme poverty, health, and civil justice. The third point is that this brings us to the question, why churches and religious communities should deal with social issues and especially with the natural environment. I believe that the religious community are equal members of civil society, which means that they can intervene and contribute to the dialogue with all those who shape their political decisions. I am convinced that churches and ecological movements, especially WWF, can sit together and to discuss the environmental problems, and especially the big problem, the climate change. My last point of view is the question, especially to us as Orthodox people. Are we ready for this dialogue? I can say that we have a wonderful green theology, which for years steps for the important initiative and action of a green patriarch, His All Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew. But we do not have a real response to green practices. And I think we have a problem here. And I remember how many times Father John organized the Ecological Summer School in Chalki, and we try to promote and to help priests to organize seminaries, ecological seminaries in the parishes. I think there is a problem here very important for us as Orthodox. If you ask me why, we have many reasons for that. The first is that the concept of eschatology is a negative concept for many people. For many of them, it means not to do anything, and God will do everything. Especially in this pandemic time, this was very, very important. We must at some point put ourselves on the right point, and this is to see the kingdom of God in the human society today. And the ethos and the experience of the Holy Communion are not only for the believer as individuals, but also it is a relationship with the world and the natural environment. Another reason is that there is also a problem of trust. The people of the Providence, especially the countryside here in Crete, do not easily trust big investors for renewable energy sources, and they have been deceived. Although the issues of the renewable energy sources hide these pitfalls, and we must see how we can make the European citizen himself an investor with moral principles and, of course, as duty for our planet. Citizens need to see results, and I think the energy communities and the energy cooperatives, it is a very important example. For all these reasons and for many others, we try through the Institute of Theology and Ecology with my colleague, Mr. Adonis Kalogerakis, here in the municipality of Platanias, to help citizens to understand the problem, and especially the problem with the climate change, and to act collectively. Thank you very much for your presence, and we hope that we will find solutions and answers together. I'd like to thank all of you, and I wish a good success to this webinar. And of course, Adonis, as you say in the beginning, we'd like to thanks for the support, Hellenic Campus. Thank you very much, Adonis.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zorbas. And with this inspiring starting, let me point at the first question for Mr. Sven Giegold. As all of us were more or less familiar with the European Green Deal and the European environmental policy. But the big question is, how can the Green Deal also become a social deal in order no one to be left behind? And can actually the Green Deal can help the European community to face against the climate crisis? Is it enough? Mr. Sven Giegold, the floor is yours.
Yes, brothers and sister, Father John, thank you for that invitation. I feel really honored, and I remember with great gratitude the hospitality of the Academy in Crete, which we enjoyed already at European Christian Convention, of which your Academy is also a founding member. So, and it is great to listen to your contributions and point of view to this important dialogue. And as we are speaking here on moral obligations, I would like to stress that the ecological crisis of our planet is not one moral question of many, but it is fundamental in a particular way, because if our generation does not change the situation, future generations will not enjoy the freedom anymore to take the respective decisions. It is to be compared with fundamental questions of modern war and peace, where also the liberty of future generations to make their own choices is in danger. We do not only speak about the climate crisis, we also speak about the biodiversity crisis. The loss of biodiversity, the destruction of creation is happening at a speed which is unprecedented in more recent times. And therefore, all this is raising issues of freedom and justice in a fundamental way. The freedom for future generations to live a life as they wish, also the question of freedom between different groups of people, those suffering from climate change, those suffering from the consequences of the loss of biodiversity, and those which claim that their freedom to live a life of overconsumption is in danger. So these are different levels of freedoms. They are social in the sense that there are weaker parts of society which suffer more. They are intergenerational because the freedom is in danger in different ways for those living at present and those living in the future. Also, it's a fundamental issue of justice. As I was just referring to, the victims of climate change and biodiversity loss, which are rich enough, can perhaps for some time pay their way out of the direct consequences. However, those which are not rich enough, they will be suffering from the heat, from the lack of water, from additional diseases, and in many and more regions of hunger. This means there are fundamental moral questions. And it is a big shame for us that it was only our children to help us to make all this a big matter of concern. Because before I became a politician, I was, of course, active in my church, but also in a civil society organization, Friends of the Earth. And I have to say, we failed. My generation failed. It was the kids with the Friday for Future movement, which have put climate change where it belongs, at the very top of the global agenda and of the European agenda. And it was their success that the European Green Deal is now the future strategy of the European Union. It was their European elections which have led to that result. And now, as you were saying, the basic ideas are quite widely known. And the question is, what will happen now? Only in 2 weeks, in a bit more than a week, the European Commission will propose the basic elements of the Green Deal strategy with the so-called Fit for 55 package. In Europe, we put silly names for everything, regardless how important it is. So it is Fit for 55, which means the ambition to reduce the CO2 emissions by 55% until 2030 in comparison to 1990, of which we have already achieved about half. This means that we need to step up activities in order to achieve this in only 9 years. And at the core of the proposals is that CO2 gets a price. So it has to be priced effectively so that the use of the atmosphere is not a so-called free good anymore. You are free to pollute regardless what the consequences are, but that the CO2 emissions get priced into the pricing, which means, of course, in a market economy, that the current situation, that those products which contain a lot of CO2 emissions are often cheaper than those which are produced in an environmentally friendly way. Therefore, pricing restores the mechanism of innovation and competition in order to find solutions for a world in balance, a world living in the planetary boundaries. However, pricing means at the same time that those who are rich enough to buy themselves out of the moral obligation can continue to pollute, while those who are poor will feel the hardest pressure to adapt to the reality of climate change. However, the atmosphere and also the planet was a present by God to all of us. It was not a present to the rich. It was an equal present to all human beings. Therefore, if pricing is needed in order to factor in environmental scarcity in a market economy, it may not come at the detriment of social justice and equality. And therefore, it is fundamental that the income achieved by pricing is redistributed to the citizens by capita. And this is what we call as Greens the Energiegeld, so the energy basic income, which means that those people who have lower incomes, they consume less, they also emit less CO2 per capita, and therefore they will be better off after the pricing than those which are living an overconsumption lifestyle, which are usually those which have high incomes, and therefore the pricing of CO2 can become a social project at the same time. This to me seems fundamental and is well justified ecologically as well as from a social justice perspective. I would also like to say a few last words on the role of the churches. We could speak now a lot about instruments before I do that, but I only want to give one hint. Pricing is important, but it's not all pricing. We will also need rules and support mechanisms for the different sectors: mobility, energy production, and industry, agriculture, and so on. Of course, the warm and cooling of buildings. All this will be needed, and the rules have a very important function. Because, for instance, if we have the same rules for all cars, it means pollution limits are put on large cars and small cars alike. Rules create a binding obligation for all citizens, for all companies. They do not allow to buy yourself out of the obligation. And therefore, the right mixture between binding rules for all different sectors of pollution and the pricing have to go together. When it comes to the churches, I would like to make two remarks. First, our churches play already an important role and a positive role. In many areas in Europe, they are the ones who give moral grounding for the work in favor of biodiversity and for fighting climate change. They are already loud voices. And this is true for all church families. And this is important because by that way, outside of the political parties and political conflicts, churches are legitimate actors to lay the ground of trust and the morality of what we are doing. And therefore, it's important that churches continue to do this and do not shy away from openly discussing also the public policy side of it, because climate change and the protection of biodiversity is a personal obligation, but it can never be healed without democratic choices. Only by democratic choices we can succeed. For this, we need legislation, and these rules are also part of our society, and therefore they are not done without the voice of the church, without moral considerations. But second, churches are also owners of a lot of land and a lot of buildings. I'm looking forward for the campaign, a solar energy installation on all churches, on all church buildings, and clear biodiversity rules for all the land which is given to farmers or used in other ways. So churches themselves are important actors and they can green themselves. And by that way, become a moral light in the way to work ourselves out of climate change and a biodiversity loss. And last sentence, because only if actors start with a change, there can be a positive dynamic. And this is what we need. We will not manage to overcome our overconsumption model by preaching against overconsumption. We will only win by creating a positive dynamic to a way of life, a way of production, which reconciles economic and social well-being with the limits of the planet. That must be a positive story of hope. And the greatest story of hope is the message of the Church. And therefore, this is just the voice which we need in these times. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Sven, for your, may I say, key remarks, which gives also the floor to Father John. As Sven has pointed out, the importance of the churches and the role that the church have in order for this transition to sustainability, for a more sustainable future. So, Father John, may I also add my question, how the churches and the communities present nowadays this crucial caring for the God's creation. Father John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andonis. It's very encouraging for me to hear the language of ecology and economy and policy and politics and theology starting to become more and more focused and almost speaking in unison. Sven, you spoke like a theologian, so thank you. First of all, let me thank and congratulate the Orthodox Academy of Crete, its president, Metropolitan Amphilochios, its director, Kostas Zorbas, and his colleagues and staff, especially Katerina Karakala, and in the field of environmental awareness, Andonis Kalogerakis, for their impressive array of initiatives, especially related to the pandemic in the last year, the Holy and Great Council just a few days ago, and today, as in the past, climate change. It's an honor to be asked to participate and to contribute. In the past decades, the world has witnessed alarming ecological degradation and increasing failure to implement environmental policies, and an ever-widening gap between rich and poor. But during the same period, perhaps no religious leader has been so recognized for his dedication in confronting the ecological crisis as our own Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew. As we know, the environmental initiatives of the Ecumenical Patriarch date back to the mid-80s with a number of pre-synodal pan-Orthodox conferences, for instance, in Chambéry, Geneva, 1986, and a few inter-Orthodox meetings, such as in Sofia in 1987, followed by a very important conference on the island of Patmos in 1988 that proposed the special day of prayer for the environment. The following year, 1989, marked the first designated day of environmental prayer for the protection of the environment, with the inaugural annual patriarchal encyclical on the day of indiction, September 1st, under the late Ecumenical Patriarch Demetrius. And after Patriarch Bartholomew's election in 1991, all Orthodox churches heeded this call to prayer in 1992, as did soon afterward the Conference of European Churches in 1997 and the World Council of Churches in 2002. More recently, in 2017, Pope Francis of Rome and Archbishop Welby of Canterbury also adopted the same practice for the Roman Catholic and the Anglican communions, respectively. These and other groundbreaking initiatives by His All Holiness, including a series of international conferences, symposia, summits, and seminars from 1991 to this day, mentioned already by Dr. Zolbas. Theodota Nantsou was involved in these as well. These earned the Patriarch a number of awards and acclamations, including being dubbed the Green Patriarch by Al Gore and the world media for persistently proclaiming the primacy of spiritual values in determining an environmental ethos. Time magazine named him one of the world's most influential people in this field. But the hallmark of the Patriarch's initiatives is actually not success, but humility. And I'll talk about this in a moment. But in beholding the larger picture, the Ecumenical Patriarch recognizes that he stands before something greater than himself, indeed something greater than his or any tradition or faith, which is why in 1997 he dared to broaden the concept of sin beyond any individual and social implications to include the harm that we've brought upon the planet. And he's worked very hard to convince his peers as well as his faithful about making connections between creation care and the church's vocation or responsibility, as Sven said, to green themselves. One important lesson conveyed by the Patriarch over the last 30 years is that creation care is not only a political or a technological issue, it is primarily, or as Sven emphasized, fundamentally a religious and spiritual issue. And religion has a vital role to play because any spirituality that remains uninvolved with the outward creation is ultimately uninvolved also with the inward mystery. And the Patriarch is aware that everyone, without exception, irrespective of confessional or religious persuasion, must be included here, and that environmental issues are intimately related to social issues, as Dr. Zolbas mentioned in his introduction, to war and peace, to social justice and human rights, to poverty and unemployment. The way we treat the earth reflects the way we treat people, especially the poor. In ecumenical circles, this has been called eco-justice, because by some mysterious connection that we do not always understand and sometimes choose to ignore, the earth reminds us of our calling to be humble. We all share this planet and its resources, as Sven noted, equally, even if not equitably. But creation care brings us divided and insulated believers, divided and insulated citizens before a common task that we have to face together. It's all about perceiving connections. And that's what I want to focus on. It's these connections that we have to communicate to our parishes and our community. For instance, first of all, connections between faith and life. Drawing connections between sacraments and nature may have seemed natural for previous generations, but today, the sacraments are separated from the material world. We have to remind people that at the heart of the commitment of the Orthodox Church, at least, to creation care, lies the conviction that the world itself is a sacrament. Second, it's about drawing connections between our church and other churches, our faith and other faiths, ourselves and other people. Because while people often think of ecology as leaves and bees or sun and soil, it's not just that. It's about the entire social nexus around them, which means that whenever we narrow life, even religious life, even political life, even economic life, to ourselves and our own interests, we're ultimately neglecting our vocation to reconcile and transform all of creation. Third, it's about drawing connections between this world and the next. Dr. Zolbas spoke about this. Theologians call it eschatology. Our aim is to realize the words of the Lord's Prayer, that God's will may be done on earth as in heaven. But sadly, in conventional, even conservative Western circles, eschatology, or the end times, the apocalypse, sometimes implies the license to discard or disregard or even destroy nature with a view to its final resurrection or recapitulation. But nothing could be further from the Christian worldview, where the other world is never disassociated or disconnected from this world. The way we treat this life determines what we believe about the next life. And the way we profess heaven directly defines how we perceive the earth. Fourth, it's also about drawing connections between ecology and economy, and between economy and ethics, and between ethics and choices, and between choices and their impact on others. Climate change can only be reversed or resolved when we address the moral causes of the ecological crisis. Otherwise, we're only dealing with symptoms. Further, it's about drawing connections between previous, present, and future generations. Once again, we've been taught by the pandemic that no one is saved unless everyone is saved. And as Sven also underlined, we have an obligation to leave behind a balanced, if not a better world for our children. But we are probably the first generation in history that will leave behind a degraded, devastated world for the next generation. And finally, it's about drawing connections with science. This is again something the pandemic taught us in a powerful, albeit painful way. We have to listen to, we have to learn from, we have to collaborate with other disciplines, especially science. We should strive to build bridges between faith and fact. And we should remember that on the problem of climate change, Sven said, we should green ourselves as religions and churches. Well, the truth is, we should be more humble than that. Religion came to the table relatively late, sometimes to this day with much reluctance and even resistance. But as I've noted several times over the last year, the Greek word for crisis implies judgment, and we will be judged by our response to phenomena that change and shape our lives, whether COVID-19 or especially climate change. Because the greatest threat to our planet, the defining issue of our time, is not the novel coronavirus, but climate change. The growing but neglected toll from rising global temperatures will eclipse the current number of deaths from all the infectious diseases combined if climate change is not constrained. In the wake of the pandemic, even the World Economic Forum called for a great reset of capitalism, arguing that sustainability will only be achieved through drastic lifestyle changes. We cannot play politics, and we cannot play God with climate change, which is about the health of our planet. And by the same token, we cannot play politics, and we cannot play God with science, which is about the health of its people. I want to close with, first of all, share my screen. This is all new to me, but bear with me here. Want to show you an effort here in America. Is this working?
Yes, we can see it. Father John, thank you.
Which began from the future generations. It began by young people that turned to us in the church, at the Archdiocese, at the Patriarchate, to ask what we're doing about all this. To ask just how is the Patriarch's message reaching the parishes and communities? How is it reaching the grassroots level? And just in the last few months, it's created a network of parishes and people throughout the United States. This is an initiative of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, as you can see in the top left there, which has created a resource page, a website, allowing people to share their work in creation care, inspiring people who are in smaller communities that want to do things but either don't have the ideas or the resources, and just sharing the concern and the challenge throughout the church. The program is called Greening the Parish. The aim is to green all of the Orthodox parishes throughout the United States. And you'll see here a list of how-to videos that are produced and disseminated on a weekly basis. If you look there, you'll see the first 10, for instance, of these: how to green your parish, creation and liturgy, creation and youth, learning from animals, starting a parish garden, what one or two or more specific parishes are doing in California and other areas, practical tips, how-to videos. There's a whole list of 30 or 40 of these videos planned out over the next year or so, involving and inviting people to share their experiences and ask their questions about waste, about animals, about farming, about insects, about going solar, about clothing, about practical tips, about political issues and policies and so forth. A whole list of how-to videos that's created a great interest throughout the church here in America. Of course, a very prominent feature of His All Holiness and the work that he has done, the statements that he has made, the conferences that he has organized, toolkits for parishes, services, lessons plans, religious education, the notion of stewardship, magazines and journals, manuals on how to green the parish, and ecumenical, of course, and more broad resources, because this is something that not just the Orthodox, not just the Christians, not just believers face all over the world. But this started, as I say, from young people, 3 or 4 young women, in fact, to be truthful to the factual origin, that approached the church and asked us, what are you doing? And it was a question, of course, that we were happy to receive and to let them take the lead in this particular project of greening the parishes throughout America. So thank you very much for listening and watching.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Father John. You actually give us a lot of ideas about how to green our lives through this very, very nice website from young people, as you have mentioned. So let's continue now with Dirk from Belgium and see how the young generation actually can change the ideas that actually have been failed, and how the civil society itself can help this fight against the climate change. How can this, the energy democracy concept can lead us to the energy transition and have a more sustainable future? We're very curious to see about your vision as you work with the civil society all these years, how the cooperative ideas can give us a way, a different path in our lives, and how we can engage actually the people to take part in these huge changes that happen around us. It's a matter, I believe, and based on the things that Sven and Father John have already mentioned, it's a matter of survival. So, Dirk, the floor is all yours. Dirk, can you hear us? Dirk, we can see your slides, but we cannot hear you. Can you please turn on your microphone so that we can hear you?
Sorry, I found it.
Perfect, perfect.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I will shortly introduce myself. I'm from Belgium, Dirk Vansintjan. I studied Germanic philology, so I'm a linguist at the Catholic University of Leuven, and I was very active as a student in the late 70s in the student movement, the peace movement, and the ecological movement. And I was also, as a young guy, also one of the founders of the Green Party in the Flemish part, the Dutch-speaking part of Flanders. By coincidence, I was thinking of becoming an organic farmer, and we didn't find a farm, but we found a ruin of a watermill. You can see the picture there. It was a historic monument, national monument. So we got subsidies to restore it. And there used to be a turbine. It was still there from 1902, and it used to provide the whole village between 1907 and 1947 with electricity. In those times, electricity brought light into the darkness. So in some languages, like in Spanish and Portuguese and Italian, the word for electricity and is in fact light, luce. So it brought light into the darkness. In 1991, to finance the restoration of the turbine, we created an energy cooperative, which was called EcoPower. And we started with 10 people around our kitchen table, the same table I'm sitting now at. And later in 2013, we created a European federation to bring together all these initiatives, bottom-up initiatives in Europe to do advocacy at the European level in Brussels. So my cooperative now, we are almost 30 years old. We have not 10 members anymore, but 60,000 members. And we provide 1.6% of the households in the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, of Flanders, with their own green electricity. We produce ourselves with wind, solar, hydro, and biomass installations. We have 50 employees now, and we have an equity of 60 million euro. So we normally don't work with bank loans, but with the equity of our members. And for EcoPower, I'm the president of the European Federation. So my next slide should come now. Yep. So actually what my main message is that this energy transition we are facing now, so it's a transition from fossil and nuclear to renewable, and from centralized production to decentralized production, for instance, solar panels on our roofs, and from wasting energy to being very efficient with energy, is a unique chance for citizens and local communities to find a new balance between the local and the globalizing economy, because this is completely out of control now. It's unbalanced between rural areas and urban areas. Think of the problems in France between the people from the rural areas, the yellow jackets went to the cities to express their unease with everything that's going on. And also, as is already said by previous speakers, we should find a new balance between the present and the future generations, so that we leave behind us a better world and not a world that is worse than we got it from our parents. I remember a few years ago, I think 3 years ago, I was on an invitation of a former MEP from the Green Party of Greece, Nikos Chryssavgis. I was on Paros Island, and we found all these little particles of plastic on the beach, and it's incredible how we are polluting Mother Earth. So, but to come back to the energy transition, it's a unique chance. But what is crucial is that the renewable energy production facilities, the wind turbines, the solar panels in the rural areas, for instance, they should not be owned by the big utilities or by the Chinese or by Google or by Amazon or whatever, no, or by people who are making bitcoins. No, this renewable energy production should be in ownership of the local people. And we are not greedy. So what we promote is that we're happy with 50% of ownership. And this might seem idealistic or utopical, but in the Netherlands, for instance, in the climate agreement among all stakeholders, this is what they aim for. And when it is translated to the local energy pacts they are making at a local level, at a regional level, this 50% more or less becomes a prerequisite, a demand to get a permit. So it is important that we get the support of citizens, that there is social acceptance of this transition. And people are afraid of change, but we have no choice. And for me, it's even a question whether, like Europe, they still believe that the free market will regulate everything, but the free market led to all these problems, led to climate change. So we need to plan this energy transition. And one of my latest ideas is that we have to reform DG competition into DG cooperation, because we think that progress will be based on cooperation rather than on competition. And all these ideas of us, that's what we call energy democracy. And what is actually at stake is not only whether people will get ownership of the energy production facilities of the future, but if we don't do this, I fear that even democracy is at stake. When you look at the economical ideas, we now discovered the ideas of Kate Raworth and the donut economy theory, and that's, you see, one of the team members of Rescopeu made a drawing of this donut economy. So we have to bring our economy back to the boundaries of Mother Earth, and there is no planet B. Elon Musk might dream of going to Mars, but he can go alone. He can go alone, or he can take some with him. But we have to do it on our own planet. So our federation is a growing. We are growing. We are gathering now more than 1,900 Rescopes directly or indirectly through federations, and more citizens, but there are already more than 3,500 initiatives, so not all of them are members, or they are organized at the national level. So when you look at our older map, it's not this one on our website anymore, but this gives a better, it's more something now of Northwestern Europe, and there are less and less energy cooperatives when you go to the south, and actually in the east, it is almost absent. So most of us are cooperatives as a legal entity, but the legal entity is not always relevant. More important is that we follow the International Cooperative Alliance principles, and you can see them there. It's about voluntary and open membership, democratic membership control. The members participate economically. They are autonomous and independent. This is very important. Also in Greece. In the past, often farmers' cooperatives were controlled by the leading party, whether they were, one time they were from the left or from the right. And also in Eastern Europe, on the communist times, this was what the Communist Party controlled all cooperatives, and we still have the consequences of this, because people in the East, they don't believe cooperatives are a good legal entity to do all this. But also it's about cooperatives, it's about education, training and information of the members, of the board members, of general public. And we cooperate among each other. We don't compete. So what are these cooperatives doing? They do all kinds of things in this sector. So they are in production of renewable energy, supply, distribution. They work on with the flexibility of the members, storage, virtual power plants, demand response. We help our members monitor their energy use so they can become more efficient. We help them to save energy. There are hundreds of energy cooperatives that are into district heating and cooling. And quite new is now that we have a lot of quite some members already that are engaged into electrical car sharing. We, together with Energy Cities, that's a network of cities and municipalities, and Friends of the Earth Europe, we created, with the support of the European Climate Foundation, we supported a guide. And what's interesting for you, it has been translated into Greek. You can download it on our website. There are some printed copies as well. Eventually, we will have it in 12 languages. We focus now mainly on Eastern Europe and the Balkan, because their European citizens should get the same possibilities as we have already had in Northwestern Europe. So I could go over this. So I'll show you some pictures of people erecting these gigantic wind turbines, and they own it. These are examples of you see our friends of Sifnos. Unfortunately, they didn't get their permit yet for their pump storage facility, but I'm one of their admirers. What they try to do on their little island, and they must fight the big. Now the Chinese want to interconnect them, and we should be very careful with what the plans of the Chinese. It's a spider that is making its web, according to me. So some of our members are suppliers of renewable energy. Some of them produce and supply, like my own cooperative, EcoPower, or some Energia in Spain. Some own the distribution system, like the people from Schönau. They bought it back from the big utility in the early 90s, if I'm not mistaken. But some of them own the grid from the very beginning of the electrification, like in the north of Italy. And it's not something new. This is a figure of Germany, the growth of the energy distribution cooperatives. From the end of the 19th century until the Nazis came to power, there were up to 6,000 local energy distribution cooperatives. Of these, only about 40 survived Nazism, communism, and neoliberalism, let's say. But we now have a new wave of energy cooperatives in Germany. There are about 850 in total. It's not something of Europe alone. For instance, in rural America, 1 out of 8 Americans get their electricity from a rural electricity cooperative. So they serve most of the territory of the states, the rural areas. And what's interesting is that they spread the model also to other countries, like they did to the Philippines already 50 years ago. So they help rural communities set up their energy cooperatives in Africa, in Latin America, and also in Asia. So in Argentina, and that's where the Catholic Pope comes from. He is member of several cooperatives, and he's also very much in favor of energy cooperatives. So there are 240 energy cooperatives active as distribution cooperatives. And the president of the ICA is actually is a member, worked for one of the energy cooperatives. So we help our members consume less. For instance, my own cooperative, the average member of my cooperative consumes half of the average Flemish consumer. So we give a lot of information on the invoices, for instance. We help them insulate their homes. We have training programs so that people consume less. In where I was born, the city, there you can adopt a street light so that it becomes an LED light. about flexibility, heat networks. My cooperative, we also produce locally sourced wood. We produce wood pellets, and the electrical car sharing, I already told you. So I think I'll leave it to that. Maybe we have still some time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dirk. Perfect. Thank you so much for this interesting presentation. May I also add an example from our history here in Crete. It was just after the end of the Second World War in 1945 that in a more small village at that time in Castelli, the local citizens decided to buy their own energy equipment from the Germans at that time and have the first energy cooperative. It was not based on renewable energy sources, of course, but still, it was the idea, the cooperative idea, that it worked, and it worked pretty well for them. So there are examples, we have the history, the point is the next step. And about the next step, we're going to discuss also with Mrs. Theodota Nantsou, and how we can nowadays see the case of environmental ethics, because this is a big question nowadays. So we have the ideas from our church, we have the ideas from the European Union. We know what the civil society wants, more or less. They give us a good idea about it. But the big question is, what about the next generations? What about the fairness and the responsibility of us through the nations, through the next years, through the coming centuries, may I say? What should be happen? What's the basic idea? What's the philosophy of environmental ethics? Please, Theodota, we're looking forward to hearing you.
Thank you very much, Andonis, for the introduction, and thank you, Orthodox Academy of Crete, for the kind invitation. This is really a nice way to put the burning questions on climate change, Andonis. Climate change, we know, changes everything. So it is deep down a matter of ethics, an ethical attitude, a moral attitude towards Earth, towards the world. But because we don't have a lot of time to wait for people to become ethical in their treatment, in our treatment of the world, we turn to politics. We turn to politics, we turn to laws. There has been a lot said, especially by the Orthodox Church, on the moral aspects of caring for Earth, and Father John knows a lot more than I do about these issues, and the Orthodox Church of America has published a really, really deep and, how can I say, integrated and holistic approach to all the ethical issues and how interconnected we all are in the way that we deal about, with the world. We interact with the world. So coming back to the climate crisis, I can share a few slides with you, if I may. We know that it is science that sets the bar. So climate change became better known to all as a problem that was identified by the scientists. It was stated as a problem in scientific terms, but it really affects us all. So I remember in the beginning of the 1990s, universities getting to the world of NGOs, to WWF, calling for, asking us, what are you doing about this massive challenge of global warming? The world is changing. And we could not really grasp the magnitude of the problem, because indeed we knew about degradation of one specific ecosystem or the loss of a species, local problems, pollution. It was acid rain back then. But these were problems that had really specific solutions. So we could identify the cause, not we as NGOs specifically, but the scientific community and the NGOs together. And we could identify the cause of the problem and then come up with solutions. So many wins have been won, many fights have been won, like the ozone layer crisis. But climate change, this is totally different to what we know. So it is science that sets the bar. But science is really, really, really difficult to grasp. This is a page, half a page from the famous report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the top scientific body globally studying climate change and coming up with proposals and alarm bells ringing on where how the climate crisis is progressing. This is part of the so-called 1.5 degrees Celsius report by the IPCC. This was the biggest and loudest alarm bell rang by scientists on where is this world going to. So as the discussion in this panel as well progresses, I think that the main message we should be getting is that we cannot afford anymore to think and act in silos. So it is not NGOs, it is not the scientific community, it is not politicians, it is not churches. We are not alone anymore, and we cannot afford to talk to our communities and our friends and our peers anymore. We need to start talking with each other. We need to start maybe even transgressing our own limits of understanding and dealing with issues, because this challenge is massive. This graph that I am showing you is quite indicative of the impacts of the two scenario, the 1.5 rise in global mean temperatures, which is, we could say, the beginning of climate collapse, and the 2-degree scenario, which is the actual crisis. This is red. And from there on, it's climate chaos becoming the new normality. So climate change is actually an existential crisis for humanity, for the whole planet as we know it. We are risking biodiversity, we are risking our own lives, we are risking the livelihoods that we knew, that we were used to, the business as usual that we have gotten used to, the inequalities, the lack of democracy, a variety of problems as well. But we also risk the planet as we know it, the ecosystems as we know them, the seas as we know them, the waters as we know them, the forests, species as we know them. We risk everything. So the risk is so big that we cannot afford to go about business as usual. The solutions are not just technical and technological. We need to change everything. It is not about energy. Energy is like a top priority because of its massive climate footprint, but it's the food systems, it's the way we consume, it's the way we produce, it's the way we behave in our everyday lives. This is where the church comes in. The Ecumenical Patriarch has said very, very clearly that one of the first laws of ecology is economy. Economy in the Greek meaning of word, which means economizing, becoming better in dealing with our resources, not being frugal, not overspending what the earth is offering us. Sven previously talked about the interconnected crisis. It's not the climate crisis as separate from the biodiversity crisis. These two come together. And it is important to note that nature and the so-called nature-based solutions are the most resilient and least costly and longer standing solutions to climate change. So nature provides best protection against climate disasters. Nature is also the best shield against climate disasters. So what are the solutions? Robust climate policies. This is like, we can say, no-brainer. And we are fortunate enough to live in the European Union. And the European Union has set up a number of important policies that are champions in like, we can say that the European Union is a green champion globally, despite the fact that as civil society, as NGOs, we are never happy with what we have. We need more. We know that we need more. It's science that says that we need more. We need all policies, all behaviors, everything that we do to be aligned with the 1.5 degree scenario. So science sets the bar. Science tells us what it means for the world to hit beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius. We need democratic societies that will get the message from science and build the most resilient and effective policies that will save our planet. Intergenerational justice, this is a huge challenge for politicians, but even for us, because we tend to think in the context of our own lifetimes. This is the time to overcome this myopic attitude towards the world. And we need to see climate change as an opportunity to become better, to do things a lot better, to become more transparent, more accountable, more democratic, more inclusive, to forget about poverty, leave no one behind. So as we talk in Greece, we are facing the huge challenge of phasing out lignite. Lignite has been polluting, not just changing the climate, but has been polluting large parts of Greece. And turning to clean energy needs to be inclusive. We need to do things a lot better than they used to be. So energy communities, energy cooperatives offer a big part of the solution. We used to have, on the one hand, the monopoly, the state monopoly of the public power corporation that would alter huge landscapes to turn them into lignite fields. Now we have large companies that develop renewable energy, and in the midst you get people, you get communities that have absolutely no role in this new developments. We need citizens to be part of the solution. We need communities to be part of the solution and develop and run and manage these energy systems, food systems. And as the European Union is opening the way towards these new developments, we think that this needs to become, this chapter, the social aspect of the EU Green Deal needs to be strengthened more and more and more, because this is where the solution lies. One final point about the role of the Orthodox Church, about, I think it was 2 years ago, when many, and a group of NGOs from Balkan countries, a group of NGOs that are fighting against coal in the Balkans, came to us as WWF Greece and asked, is there anything that we can do to get the Orthodox Church being a very important player in the Balkans, in many Balkan countries, to get them actually involved? And this was new to us because although as WWF we have cooperated with various church institutions and the Ecumenical Patriarchate before, we were used to seeing NGOs as separate, as not being very easy to speaking and interacting with the church. So that was new. And we started working with them to see how we can help them open doors and start speaking with the Orthodox churches in their own countries. So we had a lot of, a very long discussion and plan for collaboration with the Orthodox Academy of Crete, but this was stalled due to the pandemic. So one of the first things that we did as the WWF Greece, we were asked by our friends in the Balkans, was that we published a book about, the Orthodox Church addressing the climate crisis. And we got a very impressive response from various people and church leaders in the Balkans. We think this is a very hopeful message for what is to come. So green parishes, as Father John said before, in the United States, but Crete has opened the way many years before with monasteries, cultivating organic and being energy sufficient and managing their own waste in green ways and sustainable ways. The Orthodox Church has and needs to do a lot more, and it can be a game changer. So I would like to close my speech with this point that we should stop thinking and acting in silos. The climate crisis changes everything, and this is the time for us all to overcome our own boundaries in way of thinking and acting, come together and seek the best solutions that will get us out of this crisis and will build a much, much better world. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Open to questions.
Thank you very much, Theodota, for your valuable contribution to our discussion. And now we open the second cycle, the discussion cycle. So we now expect questions from the audience, both from YouTube and also from the Zoom. You can send us your questions to the chat of the Zoom or to the YouTube, whatever is more convenient for you. Let me start with a question to Sven. As we have mentioned, we have a failure of the current generation, and we're all afraid that people are left behind. And at the same time, we see a lot of discussions in the European Union about the nuclear energy. Should we have it or should we have it not? Also about the coal factories that Theodota, also lignite factories that also Theodota has pointed out. Maybe we need more years to make this energy transition, but the big question is, do we have these years? The situation is actually very emerging, and can we be optimistic about the European Union that will make these steps ahead and show to the people the green way that is required in order to make this green transition? Are the politicians ready to give us this new path? Sven, please.
Look, I'm not sure that I fully got the last point, which may have to be repeated, but I would like to say the following. So first, when it comes to environmental ethics, if we take seriously what science tells us, and Theodota has summarized this excellently, this means that there's one fundamental ethical consideration. We have to act, act, and act. So there is no time anymore for anything else. I put this so urgently. Of course, I know it's an exaggeration, but in a sense it's not. Because I know many radicals in the debate about climate, which believe we first have to totally redesign our state. We have to redesign totally the way how we do our economy. No. If we want to do this in 10 years in Europe, we have to do it in the basic institutional framework which we got today. And this makes it, of course, incredibly difficult. We also have to do it with the people how they are today. So this means we have no time of making school curricula and hope that the next generation will do it better. We have to do it now. So and that means we have to use the forces of the market economy, of representative democracy in order to make that work. And therefore, everyone who says we first have to redesign everything, they do not take seriously science. And that means we have to do it in existing institutions. And that is, of course, very difficult because a capitalist economy is not programmed to take care of the earth. Quite the opposite. So the rules which we design for this market economy must protect the earth. And also many in the institutions of the representative democracy, they were serving for decades fossil industry, the car industry, how we got it today, and so on. They were often under corporate capture. And anyway, we will have to do it in these institutions. We will only succeed if we build a societal alliance between those businesses which want to act, between trade unions and local communities which want to act, and civil society, including religious communities. So and science, and only everybody together can do this job of the fundamental ethical principle that we have to act now, and not a little bit. To this also belongs that we can't use false promises. So for instance, there are many people still around, they say yes to fight climate change, but at the same time claim nothing will change for anyone. So there will be no socially negative consequences, no job losses, everybody will be happy. It will not be like this. If this change is so big, we cannot promise that nobody will have serious changes. So when the Berlin Wall came down, which was for my country a fundamental historical event, of course, many people saw dramatic changes. They regained their freedom. We got rid of the so-called communist dictatorship, but at the same time, there were also painful transformations. I hope that we do it better, but we cannot promise that this transformation will not have any negative consequences for no business, no citizens. It will change people's life. But as a society as a whole, we must have a gaining experience. But we should be very careful if anyone says, I may suffer to a certain extent. Yes, this will be, this we cannot avoid. But the society as a whole can win also, I think, economically and socially. But that doesn't mean that nobody will suffer. All those who are waiting, who are resisting the change, will be on the losing side in the long run. Well, and then on nuclear energy, I really do not know why we still discuss this. Because building new nuclear power plants takes so long, it cannot be part of the solution. In democratic countries, to build a new, I don't speak China, but in a democratic country, to build a new nuclear power station takes so long. In this time, Dirk has planted the whole continent full of renewables without problem. So the renewable energy is decentralized. It cannot be stopped so easily. Nuclear power stations are centralized, and for me as an economist, the most winning argument is they are outcompeted already today by renewables. They are simply too expensive. There are still some vested interests praying to them, but they lost. So let's tell them, people, calm down, sit down with your friends for your tears that your technology lost, but wind and solar have won. And now we built the renewable system, and nuclear well, we can debate how quickly to phase out the existing plants. That is a serious debate. We are proud in Germany that we got rid of them because they are blocking the net, the grid, with this stable production of power, which doesn't fit to renewables, but that's a debate. But building new ones, look to Finland, how to France, to the UK, how long it takes. It's not part of the solution. And renewables have won, and we can be happy about it. It will be a better world based on renewables.
Thank you, Sven. Also, there is a question about the natural gas. Can you hear
what?
me?
About
the natural gas. The natural gas. The natural
Yeah.
gas, yes. So the question is, can the natural gas can be used as a transition fuel nowadays?
Oh, well, look, first, I don't like the term natural gas. It sounds as if gas is something natural, like organic food or something like that. Yeah, it's a lobby term. So it is fossil gas. That's what it is. And there's one rule for fossil energy. It should stay where it is, in the ground. And of course, we need, for a certain period, still some fossil energy. But again, if we take science seriously, we will have to have a very fast energy transformation, which means the demand for gas will go down. And this means also we don't need new gas infrastructure. We have now, after the coal phase out, to construct the gas phase out. And this is already happening. So therefore, we were so strongly against building the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, because we don't need enough new pipelines. We have already enough of them. So gas will be there for some period of time. In the long run, it has to be phased out. Of course, renewably produced gas is part of the solution. But the fossil gas has to be phased out. And we should stop talking about bridge technologies, because we don't have time for new bridges. We have to build the future, not everything full of bridges. Yeah, so therefore, sorry, but I have a certain allergy against this term of natural gas, which is being used all the time in Germany. I don't know whether this is the same in your countries, but I think it's a misuse of the term nature.
Absolutely, we have the same case. That's why I wanted to point it out, as it is called natural, but it's actually fuel. It's a fossil fuel, and this must be clear. Also, we have one question at the chat for you, Sven, and also for Dirk. In Greece, there are many local groups and movements opposing to windmills projects because they're afraid that at least many of them will harm biodiversity. They very often ignore the urgency of climate crisis, and they build alliances between environmental groups and groups that deniers of the climate crisis. Sven and Dirk, how have you solved this conflict in Germany and Belgium, or also in other countries in general? Sven, do you want to make a comment on that?
I just preached enough, so I think it's now Dirk, huh?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we are also facing, in many countries, we face opposition against wind turbines. And even there is opposition against solar PV panels. Often this opposition is fueled by what we call myths around renewable energy. And when you investigate where it comes from, then it comes from either the nuclear sector, the nuclear lobby group, or the fossil fuel lobby group. And they spread all kinds of what we call myths. And so it's, for instance, one of the myths is a solar panel can never make the electricity that was used to make a solar panel. And it's once people, it's like with now with the vaccination, so there are these anti-vaxxers, they believe what they read on the internet and all kinds of complots. So it's very hard to fight this. What our experience is, what works is that if you start with a white piece of paper in a community and you ask people, what can we do in our community, and that people can draw themselves the transition plan for their municipality, for their region. They can they themselves can look for the better places for wind turbines. And maybe this is a long process of a year or maybe a year and a half, but it leads to a plan that is the plan of the local community and not a plan of a foreign company that where engineers figured out where the best places were for a wind turbine, because then people will oppose. And the places where my cooperative was able to do this together with the municipality, with all the advice committees in the municipality, with as much citizens as possible, there was no opposition when finally the wind turbines came. But if you confront people with a plan, and if it is even worse when different developers confront people of the same municipality with their different plans, then people they freak out. So it is very important that citizens are taken along from the very beginning, before there is even one drop of ink on a plan, on a piece of paper. And that's my advice. Another thing is, we can't convince all people with climate change. What my experience is that we can convince everyone, from the extreme right parties to the extreme left parties and everything in between. And in the Netherlands, for instance, there are 16 different political parties, but we are able to convince them with that renewables is good for the local economy, for the local society, for local businesses, if the return stays local, if the fruit of the investment stays local. And that's a language they all understand. It's about money, but it's also about the local community, about prosperity, keeping prosperity. So we now have to invest in renewables. It's not a cost, it's an investment. And when the returns stay local, the profits will accumulate. Money won't flow to Saudi Arabia, to Russia, to countries where we don't really like the regimes, but the money will accumulate and we will prosper. So that's my answer to this issue. But yeah, we face opposition everywhere. So people are afraid of change even. But you know, it is in my country, we think it's in our country. In Flanders, the windmills were discovered. It was a monk who designed in the 11th century the first windmills. And also in the Middle Ages, there was opposition to the coming of the windmills. We now think they are monuments. We cherish them and we restore them. We even make new ones because we like them as much. So even it's something in humans. People are afraid of change, and we must convince them, municipality per municipality. I hope this is an answer.
Yes, that's a good answer actually. And may I also add, here in our local history of Crete, especially at the eastern part of Crete, we had a lot of windmills through hundreds of years, may I say, because the people used the wind energy to cover their own needs. Now, of course, the technology have made a lot of steps and we can use the wind far more efficiently. But as we have mentioned, it was a monk that have designed a windmill. So maybe now, in order to pass to Father John, it's time for the church again to show the path. We're all afraid, as Sven has pointed out it very correctly, that we're all very afraid in Europe that based on this change, people are afraid of the changes. Some people will be left behind. And here comes the church in order to unite the people and see these issues that make, let's say, these oppositions. How we can bridge these oppositions, how can bring the people together and give them a new vision for the future, a new sustainable vision. How can that happen based on your experience, Father John?
So, well, thank you for the comments that have been made even since the presentations were completed. There's a lot that's going through my mind. I mean, Dirk speaks of, planning and changing, and I love the fact that it was a monk that created the first windmill, and it's not surprising. But the truth is, as I mentioned, the churches did come late to this table, and they did not bring all of their constituents to the table. There is leadership, most definitely. I mean, just in my church with the leadership of His All Holiness. But there's also a lot of resistance. And the sad thing is that the church also, at least in more hierarchical churches, such as the Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church, less so perhaps in Protestant churches in parts of Europe where you guys are speaking from, Sven and Dirk, but the church stands for that almost resistance to change. It stands for that tradition that is unchanging, which it shouldn't, because the gospel message is very clearly based on change, based on conversion, based on repentance, based on what Dirk spoke about, planning, he keeps emphasizing, based on this notion of not just repeating the ways we've come to know and come to feel comfortable in, but in fact, reflecting, contemplating on where we've come and what's brought us here and where perhaps we should be moving. And that leads me to say, I don't normally say this because there are other people to sort of fight me on this, but it was mentioned by Sven and by Dirk about, there will be people left behind, or, it will change. There, it's not right to say nothing will change. There will be discomfort. Theodota spoke of transcending our own limits, transcending our own boundaries, moving beyond our comfort zone, and people don't want to do that. There's a lot of resistance there. I found that that's the most critical sort of challenge when it comes to issues of climate change. But there will be people who are left behind that not just the church, I don't think it's just a matter of philanthropy, but the government needs to deal with. It may be different in Europe. At least here in the States, where the changes were made and the coal mines were closed, for instance, there is extreme poverty, extreme unemployment, and there has been no transition. I understand that we shouldn't be looking to, this, bridge technology. But the sad thing is when you visit West Virginia or Kentucky or Ohio, you do see people who have been exploited in the past to develop these fossil fuels, now abandoned by a country that, wants to talk about renewable energy, windmill energy, and so forth. All of which happens on the coasts, right? On the northeast where I am, and on the west coast. But the people who are suffering are in this Midwest region, and it is tragic to see them left behind. They have no other options because the government did not plan any different way for them when it shut down those. And that's why Trump got the votes. because although nobody believes that these coal mines will be reopened or revitalized, it's at least a hope in their mind that someone's thinking about them. And I think both the church and the government needs to go out on a limb here to protect these people as well, to provide for these people as well. Providence is a very important aspect of religion as well.
Thank you, Father John. And the nice thing about this discussion today is that we bring different places of the earth all together thanks to the technology. And exactly these cases that you have mentioned, we have also here in Greece regarding West Macedonia. And Theodota has made a lot of research and a lot of studies, may I also say, regarding this energy transition and what can be done in these territories that their economy was based almost totally in fossil fuels. And what can happen to these people? These people, may I say now, they are terrified about this change. So there is a big question about the renewables can actually give them an alternative to these people. How then can we give a hand of solidarity to these people and make them believe that this energy transition can also give a hope to their lives? Theodota.
It is the duty of all of us in Greece and all Europe and obviously the United States, as Father John pointed out, to care for these people, the people that depended absolutely, almost absolutely, on fossil fuels, on coal in these areas. Western Macedonia is we can say, the black heart of Greece's electricity system, has been for decades. And despite the massive impact on local lives, cancer, respiratory problems, allergies and all that, pollution, a lot of pollution on water, land, taking up of whole villages and devastating whole villages and digging up coal mines. These people only knew coal. So it was, we can say, a relationship of love and hate, despite the fact that the public power corporation dominated the economy of these areas. Western Macedonia had one of the highest unemployment levels in all Europe. It was definitely by far the highest in Greece. It has been one of the highest in Europe. Why? Because coal has always outplaced any other prospects for sustainable economic development and diversification of the economic, say, landscape of those areas. So there's not much you can do in terms of primary production, like agriculture around those vast gold mines. There's nothing about tourism. Even the highways in Greece avoided these areas, so we would not just see them. Many people did not know where Ptolemaida is, where Amindeo is. We know about the wine of Amindeo, which is further away from the Amindeo minefields. So they were totally isolated and they knew primarily about coal. So there's a moral duty of the whole of the Greek society to care for the people so that nobody is left behind. But there is an issue of just transition in all jobs that will be significantly impacted by the transition towards climate neutrality. And Sven said it, nobody should lie to anybody about the actual cost, the true cost of this transition. This is a transition of existential proportions for the whole of humanity. We need to take this path to climate neutrality, but we need to be open about it and bring all people together to discuss about the solutions. I will share my screen to show you an initiative that we tested maybe in Greece as WWF Greece, together with many other NGOs and the Confederation of Labor in Greece and many other groups. We set out to form a proposal for a national climate law. Greece has absolutely no national climate legislation. Everything comes from EU law. Many other countries have a national climate law. Greece doesn't. So it is about time that Greece develops its own climate law, but not, we believe, in the same way as legislation is passed behind closed doors, in revolving doors, in corridors, through lobbies and everything. We need this to be a law that is developed, co-developed by people. So I will just share my screen to show you it's in Greek, unfortunately. Sorry, Sven and Dirk. I will try to translate. This is the, I think you can see the consultation website. So this is the actual legal text that we set in public consultation, and we received many comments. You can see them here. So the chapters have to do with the aim of the law. This is IPCC, it's 1.5 degrees. This is what science says. Science as the bar, this is clear in this law. And then we come up with a series of principles and human rights. This is the biggest part of this law. We need a stronger society, transparency, public accountability of private institutions, financial institutions. They never give any account about what they do to anybody. So we need them to disclose climate information about their climate footprint, protection of climate whistleblowers, stronger public governance. So we started inviting people, anybody, to get on board and provide their own comments and ideas. So now we have about 200 private citizens, that we will inform them tonight that they are co-authors of this legislation proposal. And tomorrow we are presenting this law proposal. We start getting people involved in policy making. There's nothing else that can be done. We need to get people on board. We need all hands on deck. Everyone needs to be part of the solution and policy making. Even if we think that the ideas are naive or whatever you name it, there's good in all ideas and all contributions. And then we will come all together. I mean, we will start communicating with each other and developing solutions that concern us all.
Okay, thank you so much, Theodota. And also, Sven, want to make a note, please?
I would like to make a few remarks briefly, and then to say bye-bye in order to continue with my duties beyond that here. But I would like to say the following. First, all over Europe and in a globally rising number of countries, the general support for the energy transition as well as for the action on climate change and biodiversity is there. So there is the general widespread support. I suffer a bit with Father John because in America, there's still a larger group of society doubting the whole problem, while in Europe, this is not the issue. It's not splitting us. So we are basically Europeans agree that the problem is there. And it is since a long time the top #1 long-term concern of Europeans. This is good. The disadvantage is when it comes to from the general to the specific, of course, we are human beings with all our sins and shortcomings. And we want to see great political action, but not in our backyard. So many are resisting on this. Therefore, I agree that democracy is part of the solution. If you let people locally sit down together, as Dirk was saying, but also on the national and European level, you get usually a lot of courageous proposals and willingness to share efforts we have seen the so-called Citizens' Assembly at work in many countries. I find this a great democratic experiment to select by chance citizens to develop a plan. This has achieved a lot, and people take then a common good perspective, and they cannot be blamed to be part of the elite and so on. They are only normal citizens selected for that task, and I can only recommend this. And lastly, I think, but it's true, that certain forms of energy production have external negative effects. So not everybody is a fan of looking to a 200-meter wind turbine, which looks, at least to our eyes, less romantic than the Flanders windmills of the 19th century. I can emotionally understand that this creates also feelings of resistance. And there something else comes in, which Dirk has said. If the investors in the windmill are the same who are looking at the windmill, then the debate changes. And if the tax revenue from the profits made go to the local authority and not to the state as a whole, then there is help for the democratic suffering. So if people know the ones who have to bear the consequences are also those who profit, then the situation in the pub changes. So, and therefore the idea of cooperatives, but also public actors doing these investments is a big help. And lastly, we have to overhaul planning legislation. In Germany, we have exactly the same problem. Our planning legislation is too slow, and we need to be faster, because when we want to do these big changes, we need the possibility for citizens to have a say, but we do not need legal proceedings which need 15 years until a decision is taken. And I put it in an unusual way for Greens. We are competing now with countries which have much less respect for democracy and human rights. We will not be able to compete with China if we are so slow. We must embrace innovation, and we must reconcile our values of participation and democracy with the efficiency of getting things done. Otherwise, I fear we will be outcompeted by countries with much more authoritarian structures, and therefore we should be courageous to demand also these institutional changes, and we will also need them to fight climate change.
Thank you, Sven. Before you leave, there is one more question, but which I think that it's worth to mention by Nikos Chryssavgis. There is almost a Cold War between Greece, Turkey, Cyprus, Israel, Egypt, etc., around the exploitation of fossil fuels in East Mediterranean and pipelines like EastMed, instead of a win-win collaboration around a Green Deal in East Mediterranean. Is there any such discussion in the European Parliament for a Green Deal in East Mediterranean with the participation not only of governments, but also of universities, local authorities, and civil society? Please also add your closing remarks, Sven, in order to have...
Well, I tried to make already sort of concluding remarks, but it's... I would say, of course, there is a debate about this, and Nikos knows all the structures very well. But you know that these spaces are at the moment extremely difficult. So if we see the fundamental conflicts between the EU and Turkey, also with the Erdogan government and their disrespect for democracy and human rights, first and foremost in Turkey, then a democratic solution-oriented debate has to be always tried, or even when there are these conflicts. but they are extremely difficult. And equally, the situation in Israel and Palestine, which is fundamental for us as Christians, in particular, also makes it difficult to find cooperative approaches in this region. It's a tragedy that exactly this region, which is so crucial also for Europe as a whole, is so much shaped by these conflicts rather than building a better future together. So whatever religions, interreligious dialogue can do in order to build the basis is deeply needed. But I can only say, having said that, as European Union, we also have not to be naive and to defend our interests. So the changes in Turkey, we are well noted, and we are not naive. I put it very clearly, and German foreign policy is not naive, at least not the one which we are going to shape from September onwards. I wish you well.
Thank you very, very much, Sven, for all your contributions. I think that
thank you.
It was a very fruitful discussion that we have. Also, we'd like some closing remarks from Father John. We're watching very carefully the points regarding the holistic ecology point of view of the Ecumenical Patriarch, as well as the discussions together with the Pope about the green future. Could you please give us your remarks on this point?
So yes, it is heartening to see the Patriarch and the Pope almost not on the same page, but moving in the same direction in their understanding of a more integral ecology. For the Roman Catholic Church, I think it's more part of their DNA to connect creation care with moral life, with ethical choices, with even public policy. It's not quite the same for the Orthodox, and I think we have some steps to make. And I think the Patriarch has certainly underlined these steps. The document that both Dr. Zorbas and Theodota mentioned that came out of the Patriarchate from the Great Council tries to connect the dots here. But as Orthodox, we're often suspicious about making connections with society and policy or politics. And I think that's something that inhibits and prohibits more environmental awareness in Orthodox circles, as it is, for instance, in many evangelical circles here in the United States. But again, I think it's part and parcel of the gospel message, and that's what we need to convey clearly to our faithful. I think, I mean, we emphasize fasting in our church, but we don't make the very obvious connection with consuming. And I don't see how we can do that. I don't see how we can talk about not eating meat on Wednesdays and Fridays and what it means to eat meat for the rest of the planet. So there's a cost involved that Sven mentioned, everyone mentioned. And that cost is part and parcel again of Orthodox spirituality. It's called the cross. And I often say to people that I'm in dialogue with in the evangelical community that if Christians have found a comfortable way of sitting on the cross, they may not be on the cross. They may be somewhere else, because I don't see how there can be total comfort and luxury when the symbol of our faith is the cross. So there's a cost involved going outside our comfort zone, as Theodota mentioned, and we need to be ready to do that if we are sincere, if we are transparent about our willingness to change our ways.
May I also say that we had a lot of discussions here in the academy, and maybe the answer and all these problems is go back and see our monasteries and see how the way they live there, the zero waste, is a reality in the monasteries through the centuries. So if we go back to the roots and see the text of our fathers, many of our many issues that we have today, consumerism is one of them, can be answered and it can be answered in a very solid way. Some things are very simple and we make it pretty complicated nowadays. Answers are here. We have to have the eyes and the spirit to see them, maybe. Thank you so much, Father John. Also, I would like some comments from Dirk. As we have all seen today, the big question is the engaging of the people. All the speakers have pointed out that in order to go forward and have a hope, that people can become part of the future, of the new future, either in cases of people that were working in the past in fossil fuels or newcomers in the new energy reality, in the new reality of the European Green Deal, of the new workers who want to work in the renewables. We have to see also in both cases of the young and the old, to bring the generations together and see how they can work in order to have more chances to have a sustainable future. The point is how to spread these ideas in whole Europe. We have mentioned that we have made put special emphasis in Balkans and also to, let's say, poorer places of Europe, and how easy it is to transfer this kind of cooperative ideas even in the most difficult places. Also add your closing remarks. We are looking forward to hear you, Dirk.
Yeah, so indeed, as I said, we're focusing now on Eastern Europe and the Balkans. And actually, we are very happy that the European Union had made new directives about energy. It's called the Clean Energy for All Europeans package directives. It's a long, but it for the first time in the energy directives, they talk about citizens as citizens and not as consumers. So, and this is crucial. So the Commission wanted to put the citizens at the center of the energy transition. And that is very important. And now all member states are finalizing, they should be finalizing in 3 days, they should be finalizing the transposition of these directives. Not all of them are ready. And what is even more important, that is that they have to make an enabling framework for energy communities. They have to take away all the obstacles there are for citizens to engage in the energy sector. So what we have been doing in Western Europe, what we have been doing in Germany, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, and in Denmark for the past 2-3 decades, that should be possible for every European in the whole of the European Union. Of course, the member states have to do this, and we foresee that they won't take away the obstacles because the lobby for the incumbent energy companies is very strong. But at least we have these directives at our side, and we can now give the first good examples. In Ireland, there's a fairly good transposition going on. So it is. I'm quite hopeful that we will change. We got also some support from the European Climate Foundation for making this guide in different languages. And I also want to point out, I put in the chat, I put a link. We got some support from Patagonia, which is a US-based outdoor clothing company, and they supported us to make an interesting film to promote community energy across the world. Already more than 1 million people have seen it. And we also got their support to spread the news in Eastern Europe. I just come back from the Czech Republic, We have thought about 30 people, how we spread the energy communities in Flanders. They will adapt it to their own country, their own legislation. But that's how we will proceed. Poland will follow soon. So we have, with the support of the German government, we have a UCINA project. We hired two Greek outstanding colleagues, Antonia and Stavroula. They are following this event. We're focusing on Greece as well. So let's hope that that we can speed up, that we convince the citizens, and yeah, it's our task to do this. So I can stop now, then I can work again.
Thank you very much, Dirk. Actually, this kind of work, and I'm afraid that it never stops. And it's very interesting to see how these cooperative ideas work in everyday life, in every aspect, actually, of life, because we are proposing a new way. And this is the message I think that we should transfer also to all our audience in Greece, in Europe, all over the earth.
Antonis, there are 1 out of 7 Europeans, 1 out of 7 human beings are a member of a cooperative worldwide. There are more people that are a member of a cooperative than there are people who are investing on the stock market. So there's hope.
Thank you so much for this message, Dirk, and for all your presence here. May I also now give the floor to Theodota and also give one last point for her comment and for her closing remarks. 1 out of 8 deaths in the European Union, based on the reports of the official European Environmental Agency, is because of air pollution. In Greece, we have several issues too. So it's not just the coronavirus pandemic, it's the whole case of the atmospheric pollution and water pollution in total, and every kind of pollution actually in total, that causes several issues and very serious issues to the human survival itself. So what should be done? What can we do? What the WWF is proposing in order to have a healthier way of life, in order to engage the people to this kind of new transition, or this kind of new way of life?
Actually, this is a very valid point that you are making, Antonis, and Greece tops the list of air polluted cities, major cities in the European Union, possibly also because of atmospheric factors. You know, it's warmer, more humid, so it's easier to concentrate pollutants in urban environments, but also because the attitude, our attitude is more consuming and intensive. So the other way of life, the greener way of life, is much healthier. It is a lot healthier for the planet and for our own human health. The answer is greener cities, of course. Actually, I am puzzled by the fact that we don't, not just in Greece, but in the world more generally, we don't seem to have so vocal social movements on issues of pollution, water pollution, air pollution, than other issues. Biodiversity, of course, enjoys a lot of respect and mobilizes people, protection of biodiversity. Climate, thankfully, mobilizes people as well, but pollution is a deep problem. We fail to see it. You don't actually always see pollution. You may see some contaminants, some pollutants in water and in the air, but we feel it and we read about it, and science tells us that pollution kills. So we need to do something about it. I think that the message is that no problem is isolated from all other problems. So we need to think thoroughly and rethink our way of life. And the church, NGOs, we need to stop thinking in silos. We need to stop behaving in silos. We need to rethink our whole way of life.
Thank you so much, Theodota. I believe through this discussion, we have brought together experience from the United States, Germany, Belgium, also Greece, and we have gained experience, knowledge, and we can give a different vision after this discussion to the people that we have made us the honor to hear all these points that we were heard. And we have to thank heartfully Sven, Dirk, Father John, Theodota. Dr. Konstantinos Zorbas, the General Director of the Orthodox Academy of Crete, will have the floor for closing this seminar. Thank you.
It is not necessary, Adonis, for summarize or for conclusions. As you say, it was very important, this webinar. And I'd like to thank you, especially for the moderation, for the organization, and of course, in the face of Father John and Theodota, our speakers, and of course, our participants. What I can say is the climate crisis society shares and the European Green Deal, we must rethink all these ideas, especially in this period, whom many of the political authority, all people speak for the post-COVID period. But I think nobody speak about the causes for this COVID pandemic. And one of the causes was not only the climate change, but our responsibility against to the environment and to the, because we could not have this duty to protect, and we lost this duty to protect our environment. I think it is very important to continue this discussion, and especially the example coming from the Archdiocese of America is to create, Theodota, perhaps one network with, as we say, green parishes in Greece, and to start to reflect again, not only in the theoretical issues, as I say in the beginning, but also how we can, this theory, practice with small things perhaps in the beginning, but perhaps we can arrive to create a cooperative with these parishes. Anyway, the time is difficult for summarize, but it's very important to think and to try again to reflect for this theme. Thank you to everybody, and especially to you, Adonis.
Thank you to all distinguished guests. Thank you to all our audience. We hope to continue all our efforts to make a sustainable future for everybody. Thank you so much.
Great to be